We turn now from autobiography to biography. What's the difference between the obvious one and definition? A biography, being written by a different person, normally reflects that person's admiration of and interest in the person he or she is writing about as a historical figure. In the little box on page 419, our book notes that he seems at least as interested in the background as in Lincoln himself. That's certainly true of this part of the biography, and as I'll detail later, he does an excellent job of giving a sense of the Ohio River Valley in the days of Lincoln's youth. But Lincoln as a great historical American figure, even more than Ben Franklin, more than probably anyone else except George Washington, certainly stands out for all of us. Like Franklin, he is right on the money. That is on a bill as well as a coin that we see every day. His monumental biography that he won the Pulitzer Prize for is also mentioned. It is monumental in that it is 6 volumes. I have started it, but I couldn't get through it. 2 called The Prairie Years and 4 called The War Years. So the first 2, from which this is a section, of course, were kind of the preparation of Lincoln in his youth and in his days on the prairie in Indiana and Illinois and Kentucky. Kind of his apprenticeship to being the President of the U.S. as he became a lawyer and then a congressman, etc., is the subject of 2 books, and then just those 4 years when he was leading the country through the Civil War and keeping it united are so important that Sandburg spends 4 entire books on them. Carl Sandburg was rare in being both a poet and a prose writer, at least in being good at both of them. Some, like Herman Melville and Stephen Crane, wrote somewhat interesting and occasionally good poetry, but clearly were better as prose writers. Only Edgar Allan Poe and Carl Sandburg, I think, really stand out for both. That's why we're discussing both of them in different assignments as poets and as prose writers. Sandburg as a poet we will return to in your next reading assignment. The point I'm making here is that you can tell that a poet wrote this. The poetry of a good prose writer often ends up looking a lot like prose, like Crane's poems do, and certainly the prose of a poet always seems to have the rhythm, the repetition, the poetic line marching on kind of sense that Sandburg displays in his biography of Abe Lincoln. And so Mike Fink, who is a perhaps lesser known figure, but a figure in American mythology like those Sandburg wrote about, and They Have Yarns, like Paul Bunyan, John Henry. I can outrun, out-hop, out-jump, throw down, drag out, and lick any man in the country. I'm a salt river roarer, I love the women, that's women, and I'm chock full of fight. And then the exaggeration that we see in They Have Yarns comes out. The fights, we knew that a tavern was not such a good place if the proprietor's nose or ear was missing. It showed that he would lose fights, that kind of exaggeration. Similarly, also on the left column of 415, we have a sentence that goes on and on like the long lines in some of Carl Sandburg's free verse poetry, just piling up details, as you'll see in his great poem Chicago that we'll look at in the next assignment. Second paragraph starts, at Anderson Creek Ferry he saw and talked with settlers, land buyers and sellers, traders, hunters, peddlers, preachers, gamblers, politicians, teachers, and men shut-mouthed about their business. The long list of all the many people that went up and down the river created the sense of liveliness and colorfulness that Sandburg does such a good job of presenting. The line ends with people who wouldn't even tell you what their business was. Maybe shady characters like the one that tried to rob young Abe Lincoln later on in our reading. Abe is only 16 at this point, but like Franklin as a young man in the other thing we just read, he was all ready to get started with his adult life, with his professional life. Unlike Franklin, he was not firmly set on what that life was going to be. He did just about everything. He moved luggage for steamboat passengers. He worked on a farm. He ferried people across the river. And finally, in chapter 21, he had a memorable and adventurous ride down the river on a raft. It all sounds very Huckleberry Finn-like. Certainly, we're reminded of Twain's great picture of the Mississippi River in American literature, of a river that was the main highway of the country at that time, always filled with boats and rafts, steamboats, gamblers, hucksters, honest men, dishonest men, all the character of life. But this is the Ohio River. Abe Lincoln, of course, identified with Illinois. Illinois, land of Lincoln. Lincoln was practically a hillbilly. He was from Kentucky. He was from where Jesse Stewart was. He probably talks like this. Oh, it's gone 7 years ago, our fathers. I may be exaggerating, or we don't have, of course, tapes or films from those days, but Lincoln was from Kentucky. He only became a lawyer in Illinois and then a congressman from Illinois later on. Now, Kentucky was not that far from Indiana. It was right across the river. And so in addition to traffic going up and down the Ohio, which is also one of the great rivers of America, and it flows into the Mississippi after passing Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, there's also traffic across the river. There were no bridges, and so people had to be ferried across. And that's what Lincoln did. He was a ferry boy. He watched, as Sandburg puts it, and as I've tried to describe it, civilization went by, the steamboats, the boats, again, full of one of Sandburg's long free verse line-like lists near the end of 415. Produce, pork, turkeys, chicken, cornmeal, flour, whiskey, venison, hams, hazelnuts, skins, furs, ginseng, which is something exotic used in tea, if I'm not mistaken. The life flow of a main artery of American civilization, as he calls it at the end of chapter 19. Exactly the life that Lincoln saw. And he became part of it by ferrying passengers back and forth. In chapter 20, Sandburg pictures young Abe as 18 years old, and it's an important one in his learning about the laws of the U.S. and about the justice of the U.S. It mentions money and the money of that time, describing it, and the motto of the U.S., which is still on the coins today, E pluribus unum. What does that mean, Abe learned? Out of many, one. The states are many different states, but together they are unified. Of course, this was the president who would preserve the Union later on. He also looked at the law and the Constitution and things of that nature later on in the reading. But he learned about the law personally when he was sued by people who also operated a ferry. And he went up before the judge, and in a little bit of Solomonic fairness and hair-splitting, it turns out that he went to the middle of the river. He did not go all the way across, therefore he did not set them over the river. That's when he started thinking about state lines, laws, and what this country was really all about. Sandburg's story, or the section we have in our book, ends with young Abe at 20 years old having Huckleberry Finn-like adventure, the biggest of his life so far, that he takes a flatboat or a raft down the river with a friend of his, with the son of the man who has hired him to do it. They are going to take pork, flour, etc. down the river to New Orleans. And again, Sandburg uses his descriptive powers to give a sense of the life and the energy of the world that surrounds them as they go down the river. Middle of the right column on 417 Timber-covered river bluffs stoop up, overlooking the river, like plowmen resting big shoulders between the plow handles. Twisted dumps and runs of clay banks were like squatters who had lost hope and found rheumatism and malaria. A couple of vivid similes there. When you read Sandburg's poem, Chicago, for our next assignment, see if you recognize the similarity in style there. Finally, as they get down there, there is a dramatic event as somebody tries to attack them both. Of course, this mythical, brave, husky Abraham Lincoln, probably close to the true one, is able to fight back. And they end up in New Orleans, which is again described on page 418 with all the color and the diversity of the society there. It ends with Abe Lincoln not able to register at Indiana University, which is still there, but he is learning law, he is studying law books, like the familiar image of Lincoln in the picture that they put on page 418. The young man in the cabin reading by firelight, or reading out in the fields, living the life that people needed to in that time and place, but always educated himself and working toward the great role that he would play in America later on. To me, there's always a sense in Sandburg of him being prepared for this role, of this not being just any strong, smart young man from the Ohio River Valley, but somebody who was always learning things about his country, learning things about himself that were going to make him arguably the most important and beloved figure in American history, the one who held the country together during the Civil War. We'll see more of this later on. We'll look at a couple of other writers from Illinois soon, Edgar Lee Masters and Vachel Lindsay, and the Prairie Lawyer from Springfield, Illinois, is going to turn up in their poetry as well.